The next chapter of our book, White Fragility, is the penultimate chapter. We really are getting close to the end of this, but those of you that are experiencing this with me, I remind you again that we are not saying that this author, that this particular viewpoint is 100% right 100% of the time. I am asking you to listen to it, to listen to the perspective, to listen to this person. This is a professional white woman who goes into corporate situations to try to navigate racial tensions within the workforce in these places. For instance, she was coaching a small group of white employees on how racism is manifest in the workplace. And one member of the group, and we've come to call this person a Karen, and that literally was this person's name, gets upset when Joan, the only colleague of color in the group, says, "Please stop talking over me." And of course, she's like, "What does that have to do with race? I am an extrovert. I tend to talk over everyone." And the author tries to explain how the impact is different when we interrupt across race, when there's a person of color that we're interrupting. It brings our histories with us, she said. Karen sees herself as a unique individual. She takes offense. She has what the author is calling white fragility in this case. She being interrupted and talked over by white people is not a unique experience for Joan, the person of color. And so she's telling Karen, you may not see yourself as a white person, but I do see you that way. And therefore, my experience of you is a white person is talking over me. But what does Karen do? Karen exclaims, "Forget it. I can't talk about anything. I can't say anything right. I'm going to stop talking." White fragility. And the way we're going to unpack that is we're going to look at how this becomes a tool in the dominant race in this culture, the white race, can make this something that white fragility, a tool that we use to maintain the status quo. Karen was unable to see herself in racial terms. And therefore, when she is corrected, challenged, commented upon as a person of race, a white race, it comes across to her in her white fragility as discrimination. There was a research by NPR and by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Harvard School of Public Health that says a majority of whites say discrimination against them is a reality in America today. Racism against us. If you apply for a job, they give the blacks the first crack at the job. If you want help from the government and you're white, you don't get it, but if you're black, you get it. So about half of whites, 55%, say that generally speaking, they believe there's discrimination against white people in America today. Now, a very much smaller percentage say that they've actually experienced that they have firsthand knowledge, but they do believe it exists. So as we begin to look as to how we are raised in a white dominant culture, we are raised to experience that our racially based advantage is the norm, that it's the fair and right way that things should be. So white children receive little, if any, instruction regarding issues of race because they don't really have the issues to deal with that a person of color. Very few white parents have set their children down and said, now, you can't behave like the rest of society if you're pulled over, if you're running track through a neighborhood, or if you're just exercising, or if you're in the wrong place or in the wrong store, you have to consider this because of your race. We don't have those conversations with our children because those issues rarely, if ever, come up. So, white people's moral objection to racism, to an accusation of racism especially, it increases our resistance to the acknowledgement that we are complicit in the dominance of white race over all other races. We develop this moral objection that if you call me racist, you're calling me a bad person. You're calling me ignorant or uneducated, something along those lines, and therefore I have the right to take offense. We protect what we perceive as our moral place in the society, and to call me racist is an attack. Whites invoke the power to choose when, how, and to what extent racism is addressed or challenged. We're protecting our moral character. I'm a good person. I treat everyone equally. And that sort of ignores the overarching culture in which we live and express ourselves. And we reject any culpability in this because I didn't have anything to do with slavery. I don't have anything to do with redlining. I don't have anything to do with the fact that police are more violent towards people of color than they are white people. So we invoke a discourse, she says, of self-defense. We feel victimized. We feel slammed, blamed, attacked, even though the reality is no physical violence has ever occurred here. We are being challenged, and therefore we're, in a sense, overreacting. Have you ever seen, particularly I remember working with youth groups and even children's groups, where there was always this fragile person, this fragile child or student in the group. If they bumped the wall, they grabbed their wrist and complained that that they had hurt or injured themselves. If they tripped and fell on the carpet, you might have a red place on your knee, but you would have thought that they'd had the skin scraped off of them. It's overreaction and overacting and an emotional person who just overdoes everything, and you get a little tired of it after a while. Well, imagine the entire society of color, people of any particular obvious color line. They would feel they react that way towards us. They see all white people as fragile, white fragility. So we end up blaming others with less social power for our discomfort. We falsely describe that our discomfort, the challenges we are being asked to undergo, is dangerous to us, that we are being unfairly treated. So there's demand that more social resources, time, attention, be challenged or channeled towards me. I'm being made to feel uncomfortable in this discussion. Therefore, you have to stop talking about it. It's trauma for us white employees to have to go through some sort of sensitivity training, and especially for you to challenge something that I say. I will blow up. I will claim great harm and great distress to me. Avoid the topic, let's say. Let's just not talk about it. We can't do this. Or she was warned in her discussions with corporate America to, proceed slowly, be gentle, be careful, and very, very diplomatic in your report, because the whites in here are fragile. You see how we're looked at. It ensured the organization remained overwhelmingly white because it was tough for people of color to operate in this white fragile field. Whites claim that we don't feel safe or that we feel under attack as we begin to talk about issues of race. Merely talking about it with people of color leaves us fragile, and we're so ill-equipped to confront racial tensions. So this ends up actually forbidding an open expression of racially based feelings, views, and positions from those who would challenge us. So we don't probe racial issues. They become forbidden. We don't talk about that. White people are, in a sense, unprepared to explore, even at a beginner's level, our racial perspectives and to do any work, really, to shift our understanding of racism. It has the effect of maintaining white power, because the ability to determine the narratives are authorized and suppressed by the very people that need to do the work. If whites can't explore alternate racial perspectives, if they can't even listen to the other side or have our viewpoints and our positions challenged, then it only works to inscribe our white perspectives as the universal. Let's just keep it that way, okay? That serves me better. It guarantees that racial misinformation that circulates in the culture and frames our perspectives will forever be unexamined. So there was another situation where they were working with an interracial team in a corporate situation, and one of the members left the meeting and went back to her desk and declared, again, here's white fragility raising its ugly head. She was upset that her statements had been challenged. Of course, challenged was not how she phrased her concern. She phrased it as being falsely accused, attacked even. And she was so upset about it that she was worried she might even have a heart attack. And she meant this, and the white members of the workforce were telling her this. They meant it quite literally. If we kept talking about race and had these racial discussions in the workplace, she was going to die from it. She was going to have to go to the hospital. This was her privilege working out of her. It's like the little girl that hit her wrist on the wall and claimed that now it was broken, or that she had fallen on the carpet and a little red space was actually a debilitating illness. It can also be defined as permission to escape, to avoid challenges to their entitlement. They want to live in a cocoon of racial comfort, rooted in an identity of people free of racism, because we don't ever talk about it. We've not had to build the capacities to sustain discomfort. So we find these challenges unbearable, and we want them to stop. So there's another reality that emerges from this that the author would like to say. Then it makes us, in effect, bullies. Because the effects of our responses are not fragile at all to the people of color who have to navigate this universe we live in, this society. We wield this as power and control. It's a weapon that we can use to protect our positions. So we need to argue, minimize, explain, play devil's advocate, pout, tune it out, withdraw to stop the challenge. These are the ways that we do this. If our white fragility raises its ugly head, we will utilize these tools to make it stop. And she says, is that not a form of bullying to prevent folks from ever discussing the issue with us? And this is the reality. In her workshop, she says that she asked people of color, how often have you given white people feedback to their unaware but inevitable racism? How has that gone for you? And in every case, the people of color that she asked these questions would roll their eyes and would laugh and put their heads down on their desk in frustration. And it said, no, it didn't happen. Rarely, if ever, did someone receive that kind of feedback. And they said, well, what would that look like if they ever did? And they said, that would be revolutionary. That could change everything. We could reflect, we could work to change our behavior. Things might really change. To take responsibility. But we aren't very likely to get there if we're operating from our dominant worldview and that only mean people participate in racism. That will not make the difference. It will not bring the change.